Welcome to the cave, folks. What you see before you is kind of the typical mess, but it's a mess with a purpose. And I wanted to discuss something that might be of interest to hobbyists, machinists, tool makers, anybody working in metal has probably encountered a situation where you're trying to polish metal or form metal down in a crevice or something like that, and typically what you'll do is you might take a piece of sandpaper and wrap it around a mandrel of some sort. That's just a craft stick. And you get in there and away you go. Well, that works, but anybody who's used sandpaper knows that it wears out pretty quickly. And then you have to advance the paper along the mandrel, stop and then go at it again, then stop and go at it again. So that's kind of a pain. The obvious solution is to use something like an abrasive stone that has the grit built into it so you can just keep going. Problem is, I discovered, is that finding stones with progressive grit is not as easy as you might think. Typically these stones that you'll get, like in the hardware store, maybe online at some specialty stores, they come in coarse, medium, and fine, things of that nature, and that's all right. That works for many applications, but when you're actually trying to put a decent finish on something, you want some idea of the grit size that's a little bit more consistent than just coarse, medium, and fine, because different manufacturers have a different idea of what coarse, medium, and fine is. The solution I found was at a company called Boride Engineered Abrasives. They're on the web, borideabrasives.com. And in the interest of full disclosure, they are not a sponsor of the video. It's just a product I like, and it's a solution to a problem. So these are mold and die finishing stones. And what do they look like? Well, there you go. Now, these stones come in a variety of shapes and sizes. I typically use the flats for the things that I do, but they come in rounds and squares and just what you'd expect. And the nice thing is they got the grit size printed right on them, and I think usually these are available in like 120 down to 1200 in a variety of grits. 320, 600, the usual stuff that you'd be familiar with when you're using sandpaper. The nice thing too is that look at how thin that is. Boy, you can really get in crevices with that, tight places. Right now this is just a fuller on an old knife, but it could be a keyway, it could be an interior cut on a cutting tool, a profile on a cutting tool, anything like that. The possibilities are nearly endless. And the nice thing about these stones is that they're very easily shaped to do the job that you want it to do. Now this one has square ends, but guess what? You can just take a cheap old diamond needle file, round it off, and work like that. Now you could work like this on the surface if you wanted to, in which case you might want to start off by putting a little bevel on it just so you don't catch on things, and polish away. If you're using them more for their intended purpose or their labeled purpose, there's a die block. Again, you can take your diamond tool. I mean, if you've got a diamond grindstone or something that's powered, you can just sit there and grind away. They shape pretty easily, and you can just shape a contour on there that matches the radius of whatever you're trying to polish on the inside, and away you go. So you can work from coarse grit down to fine grit. You don't have to stop and change things around like you do with sandpaper, because it's always presenting a fresh edge, if you want to think of it that way. And really, these particular stones, this formulation of stone, is meant to be used with oil. So, right there, and you can see that immediately, I think you can see, it's turning dark, which means that yes, steel particles are being removed. So, I would say one thing, that when you go to, if you go to Borite Abrasives or any other company that makes these sort of stones, the chances are you're going to find that they are made in different formulations. And by that I mean, and machinists will recognize this term if you're old enough, the bond post. What that is, okay, you've got abrasive grains that are built into these stones. These are synthetic. These are not natural stones. So you've got grains and a binder of some sort. And it's the binder that's the bond post that goes through processing of some sort, you know, by heat or curing or whatever. And it describes how easily or how hard it is to wear the stone down. These particular stones right here are the AM8 formulation. That's probably particular to Borite Abrasives. They have a whole chart online as to, you know, what sort of formulation you might want to use given a particular application. But the deal is, the AM8s I chose because they wear very slowly. And you could say, well, why in the heck would you want a stone that wears quickly? You know, isn't that wasting your stone? Well, not necessarily. That's not the only criterion there. Even though you can shape these stones quite easily, ultimately, if you're working on something like a die block, you'll want them to conform to the surface. Whatever you do in the way of shaping isn't going to be perfect. So what it is they'll wear in to the shape that you're trying to polish. So eventually it'll take on that shape. With a real hard stone, that won't happen very quickly. With a softer stone, it will. And that's why there are the different formulations. So that's something to take into consideration. Again, I just got a pretty hard bond post because of the things that I tend to do. Your application may be entirely different. So that's what I wanted to show you. There'd be more on this subject, I'm sure, in other videos, because I found some really unique abrasive stones on Borite Abrasives that I had never heard of, seen before. They're ceramic. I mean, we've all seen the probably the ceramic stones like you get from Spyderco, things like that. That isn't exactly what I'm talking about. We're talking about stones that are so small. Let me see where they are. These are ceramic fiber stones. Nearly impossible for you to see, probably. That's why I wanted to do a separate video on these. It's just that's 0.7 millimeters. And that's for polishing down in really tiny places. So maybe in the next video we'll go over that, and gosh, I don't know how I'm going to show you that without being under a microscope, but we'll figure out something maybe. Anyway, that's all for now. Take care.